So we're going to talk a little bit about fearful and shy dogs right now. I think this is probably the most common behavior problem that we get in my business anyways when it comes to dogs coming from rescue. Is we get dogs that are nervous, dogs that have had maybe some trauma in the past, and they're not quite sure how to deal with it. And for me, one of the worst mistakes that people make is they coddle that behavior. And you know, I get it. Like, my heart goes out to these dogs, especially when you see a really nervous dog. You know, that's why they show us these videos on TV, trying to get you to donate to certain animal shelters of these, you know, dogs sitting in the back of a kennel with their big eyes and they're shaking and they're nervous. It pulls at our heartstrings. But when we bring one of these dogs into our home, it's important to remember that we're trying to help that dog have a better life. We're trying to help that dog grow inside and become a confident, happy dog in the world. So we want to be careful about coddling that behavior. It doesn't mean that we need to throw the dog into the deep end of the pool and hope he swims. It means that we need to give the dog some time. We need to condition the dog's behavior and help the dog deal with the real world. So for me personally, food is the easiest way to a dog's heart. We can control the dog's diet. We can tell the dog you're getting fed every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're getting fed every night at 6 o'clock at night, or whatever your schedule might be. And we get the dogs on these feeding schedules, and then ideally, so let's say 7 o'clock is feeding time, well, I don't feed the dog breakfast and I take the dog out to the park and I offer the dog some treats. And ideally the dog wants to work for me. He goes like, I'm hungry, it's feeding time. We don't have to starve the dog. We don't have to have the dog hungry for days and days and days and days, but we want the dog motivated. We don't want to take the dog out as soon as he eats breakfast and then decide we're gonna go offer him food. The dog's gotta have this battle inside of him where he says like, you know, I'm nervous, but do I choose to be nervous or do I choose to eat food right now? So we want the dog to be at a point where he does want food. So for me personally, it's, you know, if I feed my dog at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna skip that 7 o'clock morning meal and I'm gonna take the dog out to do some training. And when we get done with training, we can come back home and he can eat a 7 o'clock meal at 8:30 or whatever time it is. But I wanna take the dog out and I just wanna get some training done with the dog. I want the dog to be comfortable, and for a lot of times with the fearful dogs, we really have to be careful about the level that we ask from them. You know, we don't wanna ask too much too soon. And a lot of times if I have a dog that has, that is a bit nervous, and I take the dog out into the park and he knows how to sit and down at home, I'm not gonna ask him to sit and down at home. I'm just gonna feed him some treats. I might call his name, I might ask him to come. I'm not gonna ask him for anything too hard. I don't want him to have this big task that he has to battle with. I just wanna say, hey buddy, you and I are at the park. Like, there's a lot of things going around that make you a little bit nervous, but I'm gonna feed you here. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna play around with that. And I just wanna, you know, I can use food a lot of times just to condition the dog's behavior to where he goes like, hey, like I hear, you know, there's some crazy things going on, but JJ's got food, so I'm not gonna worry about those crazy things. I'm gonna hang out and eat some food with JJ. And we can sit here and we can create this nice little back and forth with the dog where I can say, hey, come here, I'm gonna feed you. And the dog goes, oh, but there's kids over here. Oh, come here, I'm gonna feed you. And we can use that food a lot to help the dog kind of get through their fear. And eventually the dog comes out to a place, to an environment, to whatever it's nervous about, and it says like, I'm not so weird about this stuff because I know these are the scenarios that good things happen. I get fed in, life is great. We wanna make sure that we're not putting too much social pressure on the dog. So for me, if I have a nervous dog, the very first thing that I wanna do when I get out into public with him is I wanna make sure that he wants to engage with me or the food. And I say like, let's go outside, let's see if you'll eat. And if I have a dog that will readily eat, okay, let's take it to the next step. Now I'm gonna see if you'll sit. And if he'll sit, I'm gonna do several sits in a row. Sit, yes, feed, sit, yes, feed, sit, yes, feed. And I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna work with the dog in this environment and make sure that he's comfortable working in that environment and he's good. But if he's not ready for that, I'm not gonna put that on him. So if I have a dog that's kind of interested in food and I say sit and he won't sit and he's just too shut down, that's okay. I'm gonna let him back off a little bit and that's all we're gonna do. Let's go out into the park, let's have some free treats. Every time you see a bicycle, you're gonna get fed. Every time you see somebody walking by, you're gonna get fed, and we just kind of build up his confidence in that area. And then once we have that, so we've gone out to the park several days in a row and he can see that kind of stuff and he's over it and he knows that you know, nothing's gonna come out of the sky and catch him or anything like that. Now we have a little bit more confidence in the dog. Now maybe we can push him a little bit. Now I ask him to sit. Now he's gotta sit before he gets a piece of food. And I can just sit here and I can work with the dog in that environment and let everything you know, get comfortable to where the dog goes like, okay, I can perform these tasks, I can be out in this environment, good things happen to me, there's nothing to be worried about. And and that's typically, generally speaking, where we start with a lot of nervous and fearful dogs. And kind of going back to some of the obedience stuff in this is, I think you have a couple of different ways to deal with things when we have a nervous dog. You know, the wrong way is to sit here and coddle that behavior, because we're basically kind of telling the dog things are okay. Like we're saying like, oh, you want to cower in the corner, you want to crawl up into a little ball, that's okay. What I want to do is I just want to give that dog the opportunity to kind of come out of its shell and say like, okay, everything's okay. Like I went out into this environment, and even if it's only for 2 or 3 minutes, something very short, we want to say, look, pup, it's okay. Like you can come out here, nothing bad's going to happen, and we can go away, we can go back home. I had a dog that I adopted from the Humane Society years ago before I got into dog training, and that was one of the exercises that really helped us a lot, because he was pretty nervous about being into new environments, and it got to you know, he was at the point where he wouldn't take food when we walked out into a new environment. He just shut down completely, and so for me it was taking him out into a new environment, walking him around for about 1.5 minutes, and then putting him away, and we would go home. So back in that day, there was, you know, video stores. So when we would go rent a video, I would take him to the video store, I would pull him out of the car, I would walk him around in the parking lot, I'd put him back in. I'd go check out my video, I'd pull him back out of the car, I'd walk him around, I'd put him back in. I'd go to the gas station, I'd pull him out of the car, I'd walk him around, I'd put him back in. It was just these short sections, and it, you know, it took a while. It took a couple of months for him to get to that point where we can go out into these environments and he was comfortable enough to where he would take food. And then it took a little more time to where he would go out into these environments, and then he would perform a task for food. So I'd say, let's go outside, sit, okay, you get fed, and then we go back inside. Over time, it just really helped him overcome those fears, and he became a very, you know, happy, well-adjusted dog. But it, you know, these things can take some time, and the biggest thing is we want to be careful about putting too much social pressure. So if I have a dog that's nervous, one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of people make is to have a bunch of strangers feed the dog. We think that's a good way to make the dog comfortable with other people. Hey, everybody's going to have food. But now we're taking this fearful dog and we're sending them out to new people. And, you know, let's face it, people don't always behave the way they should behave when it comes to training a dog. And, you know, the dog comes over and they start feeding the dog, and then they get comfortable and they say, ah, I'm going to pet you, and freak the dog out. Now we just took a big step back in training. The other thing is, if I have a fearful dog and everybody's been feeding that dog, at some point we're going to go out into public and he's going to approach somebody and they're not going to have food, and then he's going to be in a situation that he's really uncomfortable in, and that can result into some bad things happening. So for me personally, I want to build the dog's confidence with their owner. Like I want the person to go out there with their dog and say, hey, everything's okay, it's you and me, pal, I'm going to feed you treats. When somebody approaches us, good things are going to happen. They're going to happen from me. You don't have to worry about this world. You just have to stay focused with me. And, you know, at that point too, us as the owners have to take on that responsibility of, now it's your job to make sure nothing bad happens to your dog. I don't want to be hanging out with my dog, telling him life is wonderful, giving him some treats, and have some random dog run up on him and cause a problem, or some random person come over and try to overstep their bounds and pet on him or anything like that. It's my job to keep those things away from him now. So when we go out into the world, I want to create this relationship with my dog where, hey buddy, it's you and me, we're going to go out here, you're going to see people approach us, but good things are going to happen, they're going to happen from me. And that can really help bring the dog's confidence level way up to where the dog gets more and more comfortable. He starts to have his place, he starts to understand what he's supposed to be doing out there. He doesn't have to make, I teach dog training, I go out in front of people all the time and I talk to these big groups and I work one-on-one with people, but personally, like, I don't feel like I'm that social of a guy, so I kind of relate to the dogs when it's like, you know, I want my own space, I want to be my own thing. I don't walk through the park and wave hi at everybody, and I think a lot of dogs kind of feel that same way, where it's like, you know, they just want to be themselves, and I can totally relate to the dogs when it's like, let's go out to the park, you don't have to go up and wag your tail to everybody and kiss on everybody. We're just going to go out here, you and I are going to hang out, we're going to have some treats, we're going to have a good time, and then we're going to go away. And eventually the dog gets to that point where they feel confident and comfortable going out into these new environments. They don't feel this social pressure of having to perform in front of all these other strangers or anything like that. And you know, I think this is kind of the best way to make those dogs a little more solid around people and strangers and new environments and new things.